The crystal chandelier in the Riverside Country Club's main ballroom cast perfect light over Dad's 60th birthday celebration. 200 guests filled the elegant space, business associates, family friends, and relatives who'd traveled from across the country. Mom had spared no expense as usual. She'd hired a full catering staff, a live jazz band, and even brought in orchid arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I stood near the bar in my simple black dress, the same one I'd worn to 3 other family events this year. Not because I couldn't afford others, but because it was comfortable and unremarkable. Exactly how I preferred to appear at these gatherings. "Emma, sweetie, come here." Mom's voice carried across the room. She was holding court near the main table, surrounded by her bridge club friends and some of Dad's golf buddies. Her silver dress sparkled as she gestured dramatically. I walked over, already knowing what was coming. Mom had this routine at every family gathering, a performance where she'd talk about her successful children, and then, well, there was me. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mom announced, her voice projecting across half the ballroom, "I want you to meet my youngest daughter, Emma." She put her arm around me with that practiced smile she'd perfected over 30 years of corporate wife duties. Mrs. Henderson from the Bridge Club beamed at me. "Oh, how wonderful. What do you do, dear?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Mom cut me off. "She works with computers," she said with a slight wave of her hand, as if dismissing something unpleasant. "Some little tech job downtown." "How exciting," Mr. Peterson chimed in. "The technology sector is booming these days." Mom's smile tightened. "Well, she's still living paycheck to paycheck at 29. She said it loud enough that conversations at nearby tables stopped. "We keep hoping she'll find something more stable. More like her brother Marcus." Right on cue, Marcus appeared beside us in his perfectly tailored suit. At 32, he was Mom's golden child, the successful investment banker with the penthouse apartment and the luxury car lease he could barely afford. "What are we talking about?" Marcus asked, though his smirk told me he already knew. "Just explaining Emma's career situation," Mom said. The way she said career made it sound like I collected cans for a living. The whole group chuckled politely. I'd heard these laughs before, the kind people make when they're uncomfortable but don't want to seem rude. Marcus's grin widened. "Hey, at least she's trying," he said with mock encouragement. "Not everyone can handle the pressure of real finance work." More polite laughter. I smiled and nodded, playing my part in their familiar script. Let them think what they wanted. It made everything simpler. Dad joined our circle, loosening his tie after making rounds with his business contacts. "What's all the laughter about?" "We're discussing Emma's career prospects," Mom said. "I was just telling everyone how she's still figuring things out at 29. Dad glanced at me with that expression I knew well, the one that mixed disappointment with resignation. "Well, she's always been different from Marcus." "Different is one word for it," my sister Victoria chimed in, appearing with her husband Kevin. At 34, Victoria was Mom's other success story, the corporate lawyer married to a pharmaceutical sales director. Some people are just late bloomers, I guess. Kevin nodded knowingly. The tech sector can be tough for people without the right connections or education background. I almost laughed at that one. If only he knew. "The important thing," Mom continued, her voice carrying even further now, "is that family supports family regardless of circumstances." She patted my shoulder like I was a charity case. More family members had gathered around us now. Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia, my cousins Jennifer and David, all successful in their own conventional ways. All looking at me with that mixture of pity and superiority I'd grown accustomed to. "I remember when Emma was in college," Aunt Patricia said thoughtfully. "She was always so good with those computer classes. We thought she might really make something of herself." "She still could," Uncle Robert added charitably. 29 isn't too late to change careers. Maybe something in teaching? Or administration work?" The suggestions came flying. Receptionist work, administrative assistant, maybe something in retail management. Each one delivered with the kind of earnest helpfulness that made my teeth ache. I stood there, smiling and nodding, letting them dissect my apparent failure. It was actually fascinating from a psychological perspective, watching how quickly a group could construct and reinforce a narrative that made them feel better about their own choices. Marcus was enjoying himself particularly. "The thing about tech startups," he said with authority, is that most of them fail within the first 2 years. It's really just gambling disguised as business. Exactly, Victoria agreed. That's why I went into corporate law. Stability, predictable growth, real career advancement. Dad nodded approvingly. Traditional careers have stood the test of time for a reason. The conversation continued around me, my family and their friends, creating an elaborate verbal monument to conventional success while positioning me as the cautionary tale. The irony was so perfect I had to bite my lip to keep from grinning. The really sad part, Mom said, lowering her voice to what she probably thought was a whisper, is that she could have had a good life. Marcus offered her an entry-level position at his firm last year. She turned it down, Marcus added with exaggerated disbelief. Said she was committed to her current path. Several people made sympathetic noises. Pride goeth before the fall, Aunt Patricia quoted solemnly. I glanced at the large-screen TV mounted near the bar, where CNN was running their usual evening business news. The volume was low, but I could see they were running a story about recent tech acquisitions. Perfect timing. Well, I said quietly, I should probably check on something. Of course, sweetie, Mom said dismissively. Don't let us keep you from whatever it is you do. I walked toward the bar, pulling out my phone. The CNN story was building toward the announcement I'd been expecting. My assistant had texted me 20 minutes ago that the press release was going live at 8:47 p.m. Eastern right about now. Behind me, I could hear Mom continuing her performance. The hardest part is watching your children make choices you know will hurt them in the long run. But sometimes people have to learn through experience. You're being so patient with her, Margaret, Mrs. Henderson said. Many parents would have used tough love by now. Oh, we've considered it, Mom replied. But she's still our daughter. The bartender, a young man probably around my age, glanced at me sympathetically. Family gatherings can be rough, he said quietly. Sometimes, I agreed, checking my phone again. 8:46 p.m. Any second now. On the TV screen I could see the CNN anchor shuffling papers. The caption read, Breaking, Major Tech Acquisition Announced. I walked back toward my family's circle, arriving just as Mom was reaching the crescendo of her speech. The reality is, she was saying to the expanded crowd of listeners, some people are just destined to struggle financially. Emma's a sweet girl, but she's never understood money or business the way Marcus and Victoria do. It's genetic, I think, Victoria added. Some people inherit the business gene, others don't. Marcus nodded sagely. I've tried to explain basic financial principles to her, but it just doesn't click. She thinks working at some tiny startup is the same as building a real career. The crowd murmured agreement. Several people glanced at me with that particular expression reserved for relatives who'd disappointed the family. That's when the TV volume suddenly increased. Someone had apparently asked the bartender to turn up the business news. Breaking news tonight, the CNN anchor announced clearly. Phoenix Dynamics, the artificial intelligence startup that revolutionized automated customer service systems, has been acquired by tech giant Nexus Corp for $2.8 billion. A few people near the bar turned to look at the screen with mild interest. The deal, the anchor continued, makes Phoenix Dynamics one of the most successful startup exits in tech history, and founder and CEO Emma Mitchell one of the youngest billionaires in the United States. My photo appeared on screen. The professional headshot from our recent Forbes interview. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Uncle Robert, who'd been mid-sentence about the importance of realistic career goals, stopped talking with his mouth hanging open. Aunt Patricia's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Mom's face went through several distinct phases: confusion, recognition, and then a peculiar gray color I'd never seen before. Marcus stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. That's not. Phoenix Dynamics CEO Emma Mitchell, the anchor continued, started the company 3 years ago with a $50,000 investment and built it into the industry leader in AI-driven customer service solutions. The acquisition makes her the third youngest female billionaire in U.S. history. The jazz band stopped playing. Conversations throughout the ballroom died as more people turned toward the television. Under Mitchell's leadership, the report continued, Phoenix Dynamics secured contracts with over 200 Fortune 500 companies and processed more than $500 million in customer service interactions last year alone. Dad was the first to speak. His voice came out as barely a whisper. Emma. I smiled the same quiet smile I'd been wearing all evening. Yes, Dad. That's you on the television. It is. Mom finally found her voice. But you work at some little tech job. You drive a Honda Civic. You live in that tiny apartment on 5th Street. I do drive a Honda Civic, I confirmed. Great gas mileage. And my apartment is small, but it's comfortable. I don't need much space. Marcus was staring at his phone, frantically Googling. His face kept getting paler. Phoenix Dynamics, founded 2021. Emma Mitchell, so $2.8 billion acquisition. Victoria grabbed his phone and read over his shoulder. Forbes estimates her personal stake at $1.9 billion after taxes and employee payouts. The crowd around us had grown to include most of the party guests. Dad's business associates were pushing closer, their expressions shifting from polite interest to intense focus. Emma, Dad said carefully, why didn't you tell us? You never asked, I said simply. Every time I tried to talk about work, you'd change the subject or explain why startups fail. Mom was gripping Dad's arm like she might collapse. But we thought, you never said anything about being successful. You never said anything about wanting to hear it, I pointed out gently. Mr. Peterson from Dad's golf foursome stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, Emma, I had no idea we were in the presence of such an accomplished entrepreneur. Several other people began talking at once, but I held up a hand. The announcement just went public, I said. I wanted to wait until everything was finalized before discussing it with family. Marcus was still staring at his phone. $2.8 billion, he mumbled. The company was valued at $2.8 billion, I corrected. After taxes, employee stock options and reinvestment into my next venture, my personal payout is around $1.9 billion. Mom made a sound like air escaping from a balloon. Your next venture? Victoria asked weakly. I'm launching Mitchell Industries next month, I explained. We're developing AI solutions for healthcare systems. I've already secured $300 million in seed funding. The ballroom had gone completely quiet except for the sound of CNN continuing their coverage of the acquisition. Dad cleared his throat. Emma, I think we need to talk. Of course, I said. But first I should mention I bought this country club last month. I was planning to tell you tonight, but the timing never seemed right. Uncle Robert made a strangled noise. I'm planning some renovations, I continued conversationally. Better internet throughout the building, updated conference facilities, maybe a tech incubator space in the East Wing. Mom finally managed to speak. You bought the Riverside Country Club? The previous owners were looking to retire, and I thought it would be a good investment. I glanced around the elegant ballroom. Plus, I've always liked this venue for family gatherings. Marcus had gone from pale to red. Why didn't you say anything? All this time we thought. You thought what you wanted to think, I said gently. And I let you because it was easier than dealing with the assumptions that come with success. Victoria was scrolling through her phone frantically. Emma, there are articles here. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch. They're calling you a visionary leader and the quiet genius of AI development. Press coverage comes with the territory, I said. Dad looked around at his guests, many of whom were now staring at our family with obvious fascination. I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. Good idea, I agreed. Should we use the boardroom upstairs? I had it remodeled last week. Mom just stared at me. You remodeled the boardroom? New conference table, updated video equipment, better lighting for virtual meetings. I smiled. I figured if I was going to own the place, I might as well make it functional for business purposes. The evening ended with my family in a state of shock and the other guests treating me like a completely different person. Dad's business associates, who'd been politely ignoring me all night, suddenly wanted to discuss investment opportunities and partnership possibilities. But the most satisfying part was watching my family recalibrate everything they thought they knew about success, failure, and the quiet girl in the simple black dress who'd been building an empire while they built assumptions. As we gathered in my newly renovated boardroom, a space they'd walked past hundreds of times without realizing I owned it, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revelations are the ones that happen in their own time, in their own way. After all, I'd learned long ago that real success doesn't need an audience. It just needs patience, vision, and the confidence to let other people underestimate you until the moment you choose to show them exactly who you really are. The $2.8 billion acquisition was just the beginning. But first we had 30 years of family assumptions to unpack.